Here we are again at one of our preparation meetings for Diamond Valley, and we'd like to welcome all who join us later on our videos and on camera. We always start with prayer, and then we will have Lisa Gubler teach us about pressure canning. So,
Father, we are so grateful for this beautiful valley that we get to enjoy, and the good friends we have, and associates and neighbors. And we pray that God will bless us this night, that we can learn the fine details of pressure canning, that we can take action on the information and prepare our homes for things in the future, so we will be ready. Again, we are so grateful for Thee in our lives and in our community. And we ask for thy continued blessing in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
amen.
Welcome. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Does anybody pressure cook in an old school pressure cooker as opposed to Instant Pot? Instant Pot's kind of, but a little different. And
Okay, is that an Instapot?
no.
Okay.
Does anybody pressure can? Okay,
Define the difference.
so the difference between pressure cooking and pressure canning would be pressure canning. We would put it in a jar with water in the canner and cook it that way to preserve it. So, would you put those on that chair so far? Thank you. Okay, so we'll first start out with why there's two types of canning. There's pressure canning and there's water bath canning. The difference being obviously that one's going to be cooked under pressure, and foods that are low in acid, like meat, poultry, seafood, and most vegetables, require pressure canning. It needs that added heat that's under pressure to be able to be preserved and keep the organisms out that would make us sick. Also, if you want to preserve, let's say, a soup that might have meat and vegetables in it, you would need to pressure can it. Or whatever ingredient is, required. If there's an ingredient that requires pressure canning, you would have to pressure can. Okay, so the first steps in really any canning would be to get your supplies out. So for us today, it would be pressure canners, maybe the jar lift to pull the hot jars out. You may or may not need a magnet. Lids and rings, jars. You might need something to get air bubbles out, depending on what you're canning. A funnel is always handy so that you don't get it all over. You would want to check your jars, make sure there's no cracks, nicks, chips, because it won't seal. And then I'm going to talk about the FDA-approved way of canning. Because we do want to be safe. We want to make sure that our food will be safe after it's preserved. So there may be a little different procedure that some would use, but this is the suggested way. Suggested way would be you always start with clean jars, and currently the guideline is to keep the jars in hot water while you're preparing everything to keep the jars hot. You could run it through the dishwasher while you're getting everything ready. You might have a recipe that needs more preparation, that you could just run them through the dishwasher, get them nice and hot, so they're hot when you're ready to put it in. If you're going to do hot food, you want to put it in a hot jar. Tomatoes, they're on the borderline of being kind of neutral. They lean more slightly low acid, which is why it's suggested to put a teaspoon of lemon juice in the jar. But I raw pack tomatoes, so after they're peeled, I smash them in a jar, so I use a cold jar because it's pretty much cold tomato. But anyway, cool tomato room temperature. So keep the jars warm and hot in hot water. It's saying to add 2 to 3 inches of water in your canner. Now, if you bought your canner new, there'll be directions that come with it. I suggest following those directions. This particular canner says to put 2.5 to 3 quarts of water in it. So, but 2 to 3 inches is about where it falls. Then you're obviously going to prepare your recipe. There are some recipes, the last page in that packet. Just like I said, I'm doing, these are FDA approved. These came out of this fall book. I know there is one newer now since this one. I didn't get it because when I thumbed through it, it was pretty much the same recipes, just, you know, different pages, different pictures. So generally the newest book that comes out supersedes anything that came out before it. So, okay, when I'm working with hot jars, it is nice to have the jar lifter to be able to put them in, take them out. So you've got 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches of water. It depends too how long it's going to pressure. If you're going to do a meat that takes an hour and a half for a quart, you definitely would about 3 inches in there. So this is going to be on the stove. The water's going to get hot. You'll see it steaming when you lift off the lid to put your jars in. These would be off. Now, it is now saying that lids and rings do not need to be boiled or in hot water. They're saying the compound is enough that that you can do it with room temperature. That being said, I still put on mine. I remember there was one year my mother-in-law was like, "Are you having trouble with your jars sealing?" And I said, "No, but I always get them hot first." So yeah, that is not required anymore to have those in the boiling water and pulling them out with the magnet and putting them on. So, and it is easier to work with them when they're not. You can just put them on, then put your jar in. So after it gets in, okay, let's stop before that, I guess. Back up. We've put food in the jar. We're going to have a wet cloth or paper towel or something. We're going to wipe the rim, make sure there's no food on it. That gives our lid a very good chance of sealing. Put it on, seal it up, put it in. And the nice thing about this one is it will double stack this size. So
Now, do you start heating the water first till it's boiling before you put the jar in? Or no?
usually you get it hot. So at least when you're opening this, there is a good glow of steam coming out.
So when you're doing tomatoes and you're cold packing it,
I
you
still do that.
still heat the water first.
Still heat the water first. I've done it both ways. I found that if I don't heat this up first and I put something cold in and start it cold, for some reason, at the end, more of it boils out. Or it will almost always boil out.
From inside the jar.
Mhm. If you cool a jar down too quickly when you're done, it will boil out. So we'll get there in a minute.
You
Okay.
demonstrated tightening on that with, how tight do you tighten on that with first when it goes in?
Fingertip tight,
Just
fingertip tight.
snug.
Yeah, now, my strength is not what it used to be. So for me, it's tighter than fingertip because I know that I don't do it tight enough. I've had enough times where it's popped off, but I know I have to do it tighter. There is a tool, I got to look for it at my house because I don't use it anymore. That you can put on and tighten it. And for me, actually, that generally works pretty good. But sometimes if you're, as a matter of fact, not too long ago, I canned something and it came out of the canner with a little wrinkle in it there. I got it too tight.
Oh.
Yeah. So I didn't know that happened. But anyway. Okay, we've got our water hot. We've got our food all in. We're gonna make sure that this is seated properly. Close it up. Turn up the heat to high. And watch it as you're cleaning up. So when steam starts coming out, you start timing 10 minutes. So it needs to vent the steam for 10 minutes before you put on this. That's another good way to have food boil out, is not venting it. So,
But the steam, like how much, sometimes there's a little steam and sometimes there's a lot of steam. Do you wait till it's a big stream?
I started, okay, ooh. It says allow steam to escape through the pipe vent for 10 minutes or until the steam forms a constant flow to ensure there is no air left in the canner.
Okay.
And that's the point. We're
So
trying to get the
constant.
air that's in there out of the canner, so we're gonna let it steam.
So it's gonna be a continuous stream.
So usually before I put this on, this has already popped up. It's
Wow.
already sealed, it's already, I'll watch it and sometimes there'll be steam and then it'll stop. Steam, like there's still air in there, it's pushing out. So after the 10 minutes, now, this is a weighted, this little one is weird. You could do 5, 10, or 15 pounds with this weight. Up in Diamond Valley, does anybody know what?
13 pounds.
Very good. 13 pounds, we're 4,500 feet-ish. So if you have a dial one, you're going to wait till it gets up to 13, and then you're going to start timing. This one will be 15 pounds, and then it will start, it's supposed to be a very gentle. Then you would start timing when this starts going down. Once you get to 13, or this weight starts ticking, that's when you start your timer for how long the recipe says. But you're going to have to adjust the heat on your stove to keep it at that temperature. If you were just to leave the heat at high, medium, high, it would just keep going up and up and up. So you have to adjust, little increments depending if you have a gas or power stove. Mine's gas. And it's like, I tell my husband, I really want a new burner, a new stove, because this burner that I use all the time doesn't work. I have to incrementally just knock it down.
Electric, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so to keep it at the right temperature. Then, let's see. Okay, when we get to the end of the time, we turn off our stove. I guess this is a good time to talk about it. So, in the recipes that are listed, it will tell you, most every recipe will say X amount of time, 10 pounds pressure. Okay, but we have to adjust for our altitude. So the adjustment chart is on there. So depending where you're at, when I lived in Las Vegas, I had to can in a different pound per pressure because just where I live. They format it for sea level. Now, the reason we have to increase the pound per pressure is because water boils at a different temperature depending on how high your elevation. So anyway, that's why it changes where you live or where you can. So the chart is there to help you out. But yeah, here in Diamond Valley, it's 13 pounds, 13 or 15. You got this is 15. So okay, when it's done, we turn it off, and then we're going to let it sit just like this for 10 minutes. So set the timer for 10 minutes. Well, actually, when this drops, Then we're gonna set the timer for 10 minutes. I have to stop and think. It'd be easier if I just tell you what I do as opposed to read and make sure I'm following along. Yes. So when this drops, then you time 10 minutes. Then after that 10 minutes, I take off the weight. And I set it for another 10 minutes. And they say take it off and then, take it off, let it sit for 10 more minutes. Then what I do is I undo it, so I kind of maybe just a little, just a little, and wait 10 minutes. So it's kind of like a 30-minute cool down, just because for me, I found then when I finally take the jars out, put them on the counter, because I have Formica, it doesn't matter, on the counter. Then they don't boil out so much, because it's still boiling in here, even when it's sitting in here a lot of times. And then you bring it out into cooler air and you will see bubbles. And
Do you not turn your jars upside down?
not for pressure canning.
Not pressure?
Sometimes in jam they used to do that. I don't know if
My
that's.
grandmother always did it.
I know that was a thing back in like the 80s, 70s,
Well,
80s, but I
This
don't
is
know.
in
Yeah,
the-
they've gone back and forth. Paraffin on jam is like no longer, don't do that, but
No, but turning it upside down, my grandmother always did that. Hers always sealed.
yeah, I haven't seen that. I've only seen that in jam.
Do it in Huh?
Do
I just
You
do
try it.
it.
Let us
Like,
know.
oh, I've done it for 100 years. I don't know
Yeah.
it.
She's younger than she looks.
Yeah.
100 years.
So
I did it a
it's
long
not
time.
been, it's not, I haven't seen that suggested to
Okay.
turn it upside down. So anyway, they sit on the counter, you leave them there
She
until.
gardened for 76 years in Canton, so I think
Yeah, I
So-
think so.
And it says in here, don't tighten it. And my wife is always, after it stops
Yeah.
bubbling, she's always nudged it down a little bit.
No, it needs to escape. The steam still needs to escape. So
Yeah.
don't tighten them more after you pull them out, because there will be a space. They will be kind of loose. And you-
after they're totally cool, can you take off the
Rings.
thingies, rings?
Yes.
Okay,
Then 24 hours later, you check,
You
make
can.
sure they're sealed,
right.
make sure they don't bounce like that. Yes, you can store them with them off.
Or on.
I leave them on and just kind of not real tight, but I leave them on because I don't want a box of these somewhere in my house that I can't find where I need them.
Good idea.
So that's me. I don't want to take up the space storing rings somewhere. Okay. Oh yeah, it says right there, do not retighten the bands. Any questions? Have you guys canned before pressure can? No. Okay.
It's interesting how many different traditions
There are.
I hear from grandma this and so forth, because my mother did it completely different than my wife does. And they both work, amazingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only difference I noticed between my husband's family and my family was my mom always wrote the notes and my husband's family. So,
I've never heard of heating the water before, or in there before you put the jars in.
Okay, so I had an experience, I'm participating in the cow co-op. So I've been milking twice a week, and then Lisa said she cans her milk. And I'm like, okay, great, I'm going to do that. So when you're putting cold milk in a jar, you put it in cold water in the canner and you heat it up together. Because then I did some other ones and I put that cold jar in the hot water. I didn't get new cold water and I broke the jar.
yes, that's why if I'm starting cold, but yeah, now that being said, it is not recommended to can anything with dairy, wheat, Flour,
I
yeah.
haven't opened any yet to
I know.
taste them,
I
but she
know.
said it.
So that's the hard part, because there are traditional things that we do that have been fine, but it's technically not FDA approved, so I was kind of sticking with FDA.
Okay.
But yeah, so I couldn't tell you because I haven't done milk, but yeah, you're not supposed to candy anything with milk.
It's quite yellow, it's a darker color in the bottles, but I feel good having those on my
That
shelf.
would be interesting.
I think the important part is just always to check when you open it and just, does
Yes.
it smell good? Does it look
Did
okay?
you get the vacuum seal releasing that you're hearing?
Right, and then, you're probably okay.
Yeah, I went down for something in my basement the other day, or a couple weeks ago. And was just kind of checking some lids while I was down there for something, and oh, one bounced, and I'm like.
Chicken feed or a garden.
I know, I want to say it was a jam, but I was really sad about, but anyway. It doesn't have to, like rice, you're not supposed to can rice, because rice, can cause condensation back up on the lid later on that could get underneath and unseal it. So what would unseal the jar?
So have you bottled beans?
I've done
I have done beans. I do not like to do it the FDA approved way, so.
Are you talking about like green beans? Or-
No,
Or she's
no.
talking like pinto beans
Oh,
or black
pinto
beans
beans,
or.
yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing you can do, my mother always, if your beans get hard, you can pressure cook the meal. Like.
Yes. And that's, I do pressure cook beans when I'm starting from dried, yeah.
And they're hard, and then, because those white northern beans really get hard and take forever. So if you pressure cook them for a meal,
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
sure they disintegrate instead of waiting 18 hours.
so that's the
Right.
hard part.
My wife doesn't like cooking enough for one meal, so she'll pressure can beans a few dozen because they'll go 2 levels.
Yeah.
And that takes one afternoon or whatever to do a few dozen, and then
Okay,
there's something to pull out for the next
so
3 or
she'll
4
put
weeks.
water in them.
Yeah, oh yeah.
How much water
So
will
the
you?
recommended
cover.
way to do it is to soak your beans overnight.
Right,
Fill the jar, this size would take a half teaspoon of salt, this size would take a teaspoon of salt. Boiling water over them, seal them up, put them in.
all the way up,
Mhm.
Mhm.
okay.
Because I think you're supposed to leave an inch when it
Yes.
comes to beans.
And then just pressure cook it.
And then you would pressure can it.
And then
I think
it
it's
would
an
be
hour,
like
hour and a
buying
half.
a can at the store. Okay.
Now,
So
that being
is it
said,
juicy at the end, or is it?
Depends on the salt and stuff,
it does,
and the beans.
yeah, it does. Now,
How
that
much
being
beans do
said,
you put? Oh, you put?
depends on the kind of bean. A small white bean is gonna turn out kind of on the mushy side. Pinto beans, not so much, black beans in between, so yeah. But yeah, they're a very long pressure canning time, so.
Kind of like meat.
Can you answer a few questions about quality of canner, stainless steel, so forth?
Maybe, maybe not, because I have stainless steel just because, so when I put any water in a canner, whether it's a water bath or this one, I always put either lemon juice, vinegar, or cream tartar, because otherwise you'll get that really dark, like water sitting in. I think I got stainless steel because that's what they were selling. Isn't that what they sell there?
You can get a really cheap canner that's aluminum. I wouldn't recommend canning aluminum.
But that first thing you mentioned, that one pot,
Or the
Instant
Instapot.
Pot.
Instant pot, it's aluminum and the food tastes terrible.
It depends
Mine
on
is
what
stainless
you
steel.
bought.
No, mine's
Our
stainless
Instant
steel.
Pots are all stainless
Stainless
steel.
Well,
You can buy a
aluminum-
cheaper one that's $20 cheaper with an aluminum pot.
Aluminum case.
I'm not an aluminum fan, so I
Uh-uh.
generally lean toward stainless steel.
Aluminum is a toxic heavy metal.
Yeah.
That's gonna heat much faster than aluminum. So your investment in time is worth it in the long run if you're gonna use it all the time.
Oh, yeah, and in health. Aluminum is
Yes,
toxic,
aluminum, yes.
so. You mentioned Instapot. Has anyone pressure canned an Instapot?
I've tried.
There's a lady on mine.
And I followed her lead
Okay, not
and
much.
I ended up with broken jars.
Did you do rose red? Is that who you followed?
I don't remember. I
Barbara
did
likes,
last summer.
Barbara likes Rose Red Homestead, which is on a YouTube channel. The reason why Barbara likes her is because she, do you remember, I want to say she has a science background. And so she knows what temperature it is, like she has a little gizmo she could put in the jar and stick it in an Instant Pot and tell you if it, then when it's all done, she can read it and know if it got hot enough or not. So I have heard about being able to do some canning in an Instant Pot.
There
It's
is
not recommended.
There is
But-
a pressure,
but I think
electric
it's a
pressure
certain-
canner.
So I.
Yeah,
and I
it's a-
love it.
It's a, yeah, it's an electric pressure canner.
And I have that, and that's what I, it's so much easier than that the last year.
Probably doesn't heat up the house as bad either.
No, it doesn't, and it's incredible. It's like using an Instant Pot, but it's not, it's that easy. And you can
Yeah, you just set it.
because like when you have that one, you have to stand there, I mean,
You have to
watch
babysit them, yeah, you have to babysit them.
This one, you can put it in and walk away and do stuff and come back. It's incredible.
So
But
a lot
I
of
would never
knowledge
do
is-
it. It's small, so you cannot.
So it's more Instant Pot size or?
No, well, it's
in
more
between,
this size.
But it's the smaller
But
around,
you cannot pressure can quarts in it.
so only like,
You can, and you can do water baths in it, you can do water bath quarts, and you can pressure can, because I've done beef in it and in the smaller pints.
How pricey is it?
It was, I'm just gonna look it up, because I bought them last year. It's like $150.
So not
It's a
terrible.
custom. No, it wasn't. It's totally.
just a little more investment. Yeah.
Yes, and it's completely worth it.
Good to know.
Makes it so much easier.
You don't have electricity.
But I have my other one too, so.
I was gonna say, and sometimes we have to offer convenience at the moment, right?
Right.
Awesome, good to know.
Yes.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Well, I have a story. Okay, so I boil my turkey bones after I do a turkey. So I stuck it in my pressure cooker, pressure canner, and I pressured the bones because it was faster. And then what I usually do is I set it outside in the grill because it's colder outside in the winter and it cools down and then I can skim off the fat and pressure it all day, for a little longer. Well, it was so cold outside that I froze my dial. So now it's permanently at 10 pounds, but it's still pressure cans. It's just now way in the black to get to 13 pounds. So don't throw away your stuff.
No,
It still works.
there's this awesome place in Provo called the Mending Shed, Provo or Orem, I can't remember which, and they can actually fix stuff.
What's it called?
The Mending Shed.
No, like shed. I've heard of them.
Yeah, my sister-in-laws live up there, and they took a dial, old one that was for your grandma Gubler's, and they took out the dial and made it weighted, and we fixed it all for them. They do awesome stuff. Okay, any other questions?
Well, would you, so as far as pressure canning, I'm not familiar, so this is new to me. Would you not cook the ingredients in the jars that you're canning and allow them to cook as they?
Depends what it
Okay.
is. Like, I wanna say that vegetable soup one, I haven't actually done this vegetable soup, I do another one. But see how it says combine all the vegetables in a large stock pot, add water, simmer for 15 minutes, season it. You, at the very least, you're usually getting it up to temperature and starting maybe the cooking, and then you're gonna put it in jars.
Yeah, because the vegetables are gonna be like killed by the time you do the.
I know, it's a fine line.
You could use probably boiling water on them and.
So some of the pre-cooking process, like when you're making a vegetable soup, is to start to get it saucy, as opposed to vegetables in water. Like if there's tomatoes in it, are there tomatoes in this? There is. Yeah, the tomatoes need to start building that sauce texture, and that happens when you do that 15-minute cooking beforehand. Obviously, nutrition-wise, pretty much anything you're gonna pressure can might be lacking its original nutritional content by the time it's done, because it is cooking for so long. Like I know I put corn on here. I've never canned corn because I would prefer to freeze corn. Yeah, if I'm going to store it, I would prefer frozen. I have done beets. However, I think we've decided at our house we'd rather have pickled beets, and so the vinegar makes it a water bath product, not a pressure can product. And beets in a pressure canner are pretty bleached out. That dark color is gone.
So what would you recommend using a pressure canner for? Mostly meat items, not vegetarian items?
Mostly,
Green
I
beans.
think it depends what you eat. Green beans, yeah. If you've got green beans in your garden, green beans, I put the raw pack, it's on the bottom of the meats because I ran out of room. Because it's washing them, break the ends off, get the strings out, you can cut them into sizes if you want, throw them in the jar, then you put the salt in, boil the water, boiling water over it, rings, and then it's relatively easy and quick.
Another easy one is carrots.
Yeah,
So-
so carrots,
I mean, it's Sunday afternoon, all we have to do is get that jar of meat, get that jar of carrots, get that jar of beans, warm them up, and you've got stew.
yeah.
So you would never do like your tomatoes in a pressure canner?
Yes, I did last year. I have a sister-in-law who uses her pressure canner for everything now. That being said, she's not canning
Why?
peaches anymore.
Is
She's not canning the fruits
Safer
anymore.
or easier than
It's
water
easier
bath?
for her.
Okay.
It's just easier for her. Tomatoes, the main difference between pressure canning tomatoes and water bathing tomatoes is these are gonna be more mushy.
Yeah.
So it depends what you're using it for. We've tried a lot of salsa recipes over the year, canning them, and we've decided we would rather have salsa just made with canned tomatoes and we throw everything else in.
Put it together later.
Yeah, like flavor wise, for us. I didn't grow up with bottled salsa, wasn't even around. You know, my husband grew up with ketchup on his tacos and bottled salsa. So we weren't used to a bottled salsa anyway, and so, you know, if we just can't cut up tomatoes, onions, and peppers and cilantro and put a few seasonings in there and call it fresh and good, then we'd rather just grab a bottle of tomatoes.
Make the salsa that.
Yeah, so things I use tomatoes for, it doesn't really matter if they're mushier or firmer. And some of it's preference. Sometimes, you know,
I'm totally ignorant, so I'm coming at this question from the ignorant side. Fruit, is it pressure canned or steam?
no, fruit is usually water bathed. Tomato is that fruit that's kind of right there on the neutral line where supposed to add the lemon juice in there and the salt and make it more acidic. But yeah, fruit is usually a water bath.
And the reason you water bath green beans is because you're not adding vinegar to them and they're
Yeah,
not
pressure can green
acidic
beans.
enough to.
Yes.
that.
Any vegetable pretty much that is green
They
will
can
need
get
to be pressure
botulism.
canned.
I
Yeah,
think you can get botulism.
yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't get hot enough in the canning process if you don't pressure can it to kill off what could potentially make you ill. So,
Okay.
let's see. Beef stocks, vegetable stocks, chicken stocks. She talked about doing your turkey bones at Thanksgiving. I have to laugh, that's kind of a standing joke because that's what my husband's grandmother would do, and they all remember that. And then I took a class and learned why she was doing that. Like, smart woman.
Bone broth is very nutritious.
And then, yeah, that whole broth's a big thing. You could can it.
I just stick it in the freezer.
Yeah. But
Or use
she could can that. She could put that in a jar and she could pressure can that for later.
And the reason that you pressure can salsa is because you're adding other vegetables to the tomatoes and you can't water them.
Usually you don't pressure can salsa because there's vinegar. It's usually in every recipe.
Oh, you add vinegar.
Yeah,
If you were
and if you were gonna
adding
do a
vinegar.
salsa recipe, make sure you find an approved canned one. I forgot to get some resources on here. Pretty much, the government has a website that I don't know this off the top of my head, but I know across it probably is going. Where we'll talk about canning safely, some of these things. That's where the chicken, rabbit, and meat recipes came from, was off the government website. That this is approved right now for that. Extension services, extension service in whatever state or whatever, a lot of them have online, some of them have really good canning guides that, you know, have like 10 sections of whatever you want to can.
Now, like if you pressure cook, let's say chicken breast, how much water do you put in it? None.
Right.
None, okay.
It makes its own.
Yeah, it'll make its own.
Okay,
So you can cube it, you can just do it to fit in your jar and stack it up, and it makes its own juice. Put the salt in it, and it tastes way
what
better than
meat
a can.
doesn't make its own juice then?
I'm not sure
With
because
I want
the raw
gravy.
the raw pack on the beef says that you don't have to add liquid. And
But
I
I add
haven't
some.
tried that.
Oh, it's amazing
For the
'Cause-
gravy.
without
Without
editing.
Yeah,
For
because when I do beef, I'm like you, it's my shortcut to stew.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I've only done it hot pack,
And you add salt,
Mhm.
you'd add
yes.
like a half teaspoon.
Generally, it's always a teaspoon for quart and a half a teaspoon
Okay.
for pint,
Okay,
generally.
and no, just stuff it in and no water, okay.
So, let's see, I personally haven't done ground beef, but Barbara has, so it turned out good. And have you done sweet potatoes? Do you do it with just water, like it says here, or do you use simple syrup?
That's a really good question.
Okay.
Probably just water though, but
Yeah. So, I guess depending how you like your sweet potatoes, you know, you could find a different recipe. But these were anyway. Some basic ones.
Is there a resource that online that lists what must be pressure can versus what can be water bath can? I've only done tomatoes and applesauce. That's the extent of my can.
I think it just depends what you're looking to can.
Well, if I was.
Is there something in your head you're like, I really would like to can this? I mean, there probably is online, a definitive.
Your ball book probably says, right?
Well, I
Let me
have a
look.
lot of friends that do really bad canning. Like, it's good, everyone's alive in their family, for years, they've been canning this way, water bath canning, and that's maybe, I should say that for the water bath canning class, but they're mixing different things with tomatoes, and water bath canning, vegetarian chilies, and things like that, and they're sending them to me, and I'm like, I don't know if I should be eating this,
Yeah,
because I've been reading, it's not a good.
I myself would be very leery of that because it depends what they're putting with it. Now, this cookbook didn't have it, and it used to be online, I don't know if it is. Zucchini right now is deemed not safe to pressure can. because there is too much discrepancy on how long you're supposed to do it.
So dehydrated.
So
That's
that
what
would
I
be,
mean.
that would be the better
You can
choice.
pressure can meat, but you can't pressure can zucchini. That doesn't really make any sense.
Right.
I don't know, I
Probably if
just,
you
so I
did
had a
it-
sister-in-law who used to do tomatoes and zucchini. And I have seen recipes years ago for
Oh.
tomatoes and zucchini online, it's all pressure canned. So I can't imagine anything they're putting with the tomato. Because I picture a vegetable, probably green, like green pepper or onions or something, and it should be pressure canned, not water bath canned.
Okay, so anytime you're making a salsa or something like that, you
No,
have
no,
to
no, no,
pressure.
no. Salsa would have vinegar. Vinegar added to
You have
those
to ask the
ingredients
acid
increases the acid level, meaning it could be water bath canned.
level. Okay, but if you weren't adding the vinegar, it would have to be pressure.
Yeah, or lemon juice, something that's bringing it up to the right level. Like I couldn't tell you how much vinegar or how much, you know what I mean?
Is there a way to test it with like a pH tester, like your tomatoes? like-
Probably.
Yeah,
With the litmus paper, probably.
so that you wouldn't.
I'm
have
just
to
not
add-
that, like, I might search, like, there are a lot of bloggers online, there's a lot of homesteaders, there's a lot of gardeners that you can find probably almost anything you want can. The question will be, is it safe? You know, so,
Right. there's a-
so, yeah, I would suggest, so here's the hard part, like, I have some canning guides at home, but I printed them, an easy 15 years ago. But has the culture changed on that, like with zucchini, it's not safe, nobody can really decide. You know what I mean, so I don't know, but zucchini, in all fairness, canning zucchini is not the most preferable way, like you're not gonna just open the jar and heat it up and eat it.
Right.
You're not, it's like you're gonna grind it up and you're gonna hide it in a soup, you're gonna hide it in, you know, a spaghetti sauce, you're gonna hide it, you know.
Or you're gonna dehydrate it with lots of spices and eat chips that are just delicious.
Okay, but we've even dehydrated the spiral before,
Oh, yeah.
and then, but I'm trying to think if we reconstituted it
Here it
and
says,
put spaghetti, I used it for spaghetti.
just from Canning 101, a pH of 4.6 or below is deemed high acid, enough to water bath.
Yeah,
So.
That is high acid, anything.
So 4.6.
Mhm.
or even,
Low.
I mean,
Under 5.
Yeah.
so this, I was gonna say, yeah. Okay, so right here it does say, so high acid foods that most likely you could water bath would be lemons, pickles, gooseberries, apricots, plums, apples, blackberries, sour cherries, peaches, sauerkraut, pears, and tomatoes.
You could can sauerkraut?
I've heard of that, I haven't done
In
it,
the
but
water
I've heard of it.
Because it's gonna
It's
have the vinegar
very-
in it.
Oh, the lactic acid.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
I've never tried doing that.
we always just put it in the fridge. Once it's finished,
It
it's in the
lasts
fridge
forever,
for
but
a
then
very
you
long
should
time.
see my refrigerator. It's a
ours.
fermentation experiment. I
Oh,
ferment
really?
everything. And it's like, it gets full, and then I'm like, we have to eat all of this before we can go to the grocery store.
we do.
I'm sorry, food. I love to ferment everything, so that's the way I like to preserve, but I only have
Okay.
one refrigerator right now.
so question,
Yes,
have you fermented salsa?
yes, it's
So
the
good.
best. It's the best, but then it's
I know,
like
store
my
it's better
refrigerator, I still have green cherry tomatoes from the end of the garden last year, and they're like, they taste like olives, they get better and better in the refrigerator. But my refrigerator is full of ferment, so.
Well, you know what, that's something you could try,
Mhm.
you know?
Wait, that's
You
safe
could
to
just
water
do,
bath.
you could just do 3 jars, you know what I mean, and see how it goes. Okay, let me go back and see if it's in here.
I will
Each
look
of
at-
the different things. and
Oh
stuff.
my gosh.
Okay,
So that is safe to water bath and because of the lactic acid, how exciting.
yes, because see, they're telling me to ferment it,
We can water back the salsa then too, because it's full of lactic acid, which is a
Yeah,
natural preservative.
It says you bring the sauerkraut to a simmer.
I wanna go home and do this. Thanks, that was the best tip ever.
So if you do quarts, it only is 20 minutes to,
All right.
Wow.
I hope
So,
my
yeah.
garden tomatoes work out this year.
Me too.
All of us. Wish you all a good harvest.
Yes, every single bit of fruit got frozen, it's
Yeah.
gone, so we're trying to get anything else to grow.
Yes,
So have
we
you
had to replant.
Yes, that's the guides I'm talking about, that I've had
Yes.
for years.
Me too.
Now, they would probably revise them.
It is,
Maybe you should send that link to her.
yes,
we
I
might
will.
send it to you.
Because they have it divided down in sections.
Yeah.
And it is helpful. It was helpful, like when I first started pressure canning especially, it was like, okay, what recipes can I find, you know? This was back in the day before there was 20 million bloggers in it, you know? So I was sticking with those type of guides and yeah, it just makes it interesting.
Lisa, thank you very much. This has
Yeah.
been awesome.